More than 12 decades ago, when the world was ruled by high society norms, Peggy Guggenheim was busy breaking every single one of them. Peggy Guggenheim wasn't just an art collector. She was a living, breathing work of art herself. Her life was filled with scandalous romances, bold choices, and a knack for discovering artists who would change the art world forever. She shocked high society with her unconventional lifestyle and left behind a legacy that's still celebrated today. From her rebellious spirit to her groundbreaking art collection, Peggy's story is anything but ordinary. Join me as we explore the scandalous life of Peggy Guggenheim, the queen of Bohemian art who redefined what it means to live without limits. A gilded but lonely childhood. Peggy Guggenheim was born into extraordinary wealth on August 26, 1898, in New York. Her family fortune came from the mining and smelting industries, making the Guggenheims one of the richest families in America. Her father, Benjamin Guggenheim, and uncle, Solomon R. Guggenheim, were powerful figures in their fields, and her mother, Florette Seligman, came from a prominent banking family. On the surface, Peggy's childhood appeared to be golden, but it was far from happy. Peggy often described her early years as gilt-edged. While her family lived like royalty, Peggy and her two sisters were left to fend for themselves. Her mother, known for her eccentric habits, wasn't very involved, and her father, often away with other women, rarely spent time at home. Despite his flaws, Peggy adored her father. So when Benjamin died in the sinking of the RMS Titanic in 1912, Peggy's world fell apart. She was just 13 years old and suffered a nervous breakdown from the trauma. Losing her father wasn't just an emotional blow. Benjamin had also lost much of his wealth before his death, leaving Peggy and her family feeling much poorer compared to their lavishly wealthy Guggenheim relatives. This marked the beginning of Peggy's feelings of being an outsider. She later said, "I never considered myself a real Guggenheim anymore after that." As a teenager, she rebelled against her wealthy roots, even shaving off her eyebrows. Her antics earned her the reputation of the enfant terrible of the family, which was a title she would wear proudly for the rest of her life. Discovering freedom in Bohemia. At 21, Peggy received her inheritance, which, though much smaller than her cousins, gave her financial independence. Determined to escape her family's dull, bourgeois world, she set out to create a life that was entirely her own. In 1920, she began working at Sunwise Turn, a pioneering bookstore in Manhattan owned by women. The bookstore wasn't just a place to buy books. It was a hub for avant-garde literature, radical ideas, and experimental art. It was here that Peggy first stepped into the bohemian lifestyle she had always craved. Her cousin, art critic Harold Loeb, later wrote that Peggy was deeply influenced by the bookstore's co-founder, Mary Mowbray Clark. Mary introduced Peggy to the latest trends in experimental painting and taught her to embrace new ideals. Peggy, feeling guilty about her inherited wealth, began supporting struggling artists and writers by buying their work, giving them money, or even feeding them. At the end of 1920, Peggy left New York for Paris, where she explored her growing passion for art. She would go to great lengths to see paintings, even traveling to small, out-of-the-way towns for a single masterpiece. She quickly became friends with avant-garde artists and writers like Marcel Duchamp, Romaine Brooks, and Juna Barnes. Duchamp became her lifelong mentor, teaching her everything she knew about modern art. Peggy later said, "He taught me everything that I know about modern art." Life in Paris was a revelation for Peggy. She immersed herself in the city's vibrant art scene, where surrealism was just beginning to take shape. Peggy befriended artists like Man Ray, who even made her his muse. Through Duchamp, she gained access to the most cutting-edge artists of the time, including Constantin Brancusi, Yves Tanguy, and Salvador Dali. Peggy loved to shock high society, and she found a community of like-minded rebels in Paris. Her unconventional lifestyle and bold personality made her a central figure in the bohemian world. She wasn't afraid to take risks, whether in her personal life or her art collection. At a time when few women were involved in the male-dominated world of art, Peggy carved out her own space. She didn't just collect art. She championed the artists themselves, often helping them financially and emotionally. In Paris, Peggy's fascination with modern art deepened. She once said, "It was my freedom, my liberation. Art became her way of finding herself emotionally and expressing her individuality. This passion would eventually lead her to create one of the most important art collections of the 20th century. Peggy quickly found herself at the center of Paris's avant-garde art scene, mingling with creative giants like Marcel Duchamp, Constantin Brancusi, and Juna Barnes. But Peggy's thirst for discovery wasn't limited to art. She traveled across Europe, immersing herself in classical and Renaissance works. She would often spend hours traveling just to see a single masterpiece in a small town. Yet while she was uncovering the secrets of art history, Peggy also stumbled upon something that ignited a different kind of curiosity. At 23, she came across explicit frescoes from Pompeii showing couples in various intimate positions. Peggy described these images in her autobiography, saying, "I was very curious and wanted to try them all out myself." Her fascination with human desire was as strong as her passion for art, and soon she was ready to explore both. Peggy's first serious romantic encounter came when Lawrence Vail, an artist and writer, visited her in Paris. He suggested they spend the night together, and Peggy, never one to hesitate, agreed immediately. Surprised by her boldness, Vail proposed they wait for a more convenient moment. Peggy, however, was ready right then and there, saying, "How about right now?" This fearless attitude would define much of her personal life. The king of Bohemians and a turbulent marriage. Eager to shed what she called her burdensome virginity, Peggy married Lawrence Vail in 1922. Dubbed the King of Bohemians, Vail was as unpredictable as he was talented. Together they had 2 children, Sinbad and Pegeen, but their marriage was anything but blissful. Vail had a fiery temper and often lashed out. He threw Peggy's shoes out of windows, smashed chandeliers, and even once held her head underwater in a bathtub during an argument. Despite his aggressive behavior, Peggy stayed with him for years. It wasn't just love that kept her there. Perhaps it was also her rebellious streak and refusal to conform to expectations. The breaking point came in 1928 when Vail had an affair with American writer Kay Boyle. This betrayal was too much for Peggy to bear, and the marriage ended in divorce. Reflecting on her relationships, Peggy noted that many of her partners tried to diminish her, possibly because they depended on her wealth. Yet, she never let these experiences break her spirit. After her divorce, Peggy didn't shy away from love. She fell for John Farrar Holmes, a British writer and critic she met in 1928. Their romance began with a kiss during their first meeting, and Peggy later wrote, "I can attribute everything that followed to that simple little kiss." Peggy and Holmes spent the next few years traveling extensively. She estimated that they visited at least 20 countries, covering what she described as 10 million miles of ground. But their relationship, like her marriage to Vail, was far from perfect. Holmes was controlling and cruel. He forced Peggy to stand undressed in front of open windows during winter and threw drinks in her face. At one point, he even threatened to damage her face so no man would ever look at her again. Despite this abuse, Peggy remained with him, perhaps drawn to the intensity of their connection. Tragedy struck in 1934 when Holmes fractured his wrist during a horse ride. What should have been a routine surgery turned fatal when he died under anesthesia. Peggy was devastated by his sudden death, but she didn't let it stop her from moving forward. New love and a new purpose. After Holmes's death, Peggy quickly entered a relationship with Douglas Garman, a publishing director she and Holmes had met the year before. Garman sent Peggy a letter of condolence after Holmes's passing, and soon after the two became lovers. Garman was deeply involved in communist politics and encouraged Peggy to join the Communist Party of Great Britain, which she did to please him. However, Garman's increasing political commitments left Peggy feeling isolated. He spent more and more time traveling as a lecturer, and Peggy described her life with him as extremely lonely. The relationship began to crumble as Garman drifted further away. Eventually, he fell for another woman within the Communist Party and left Peggy. Heartbroken and unsure of her future, Peggy realized she needed to find a purpose beyond her relationships. Her friend Peggy Waldman offered a solution: open an art gallery. Inspired by the idea, Peggy moved to London in 1938 and opened Guggenheim June. Her first exhibition featured the works of Jean Cocteau, and her gallery quickly gained recognition for showcasing modern artists like Pablo Picasso, Henry Moore, and Yves Tanguy. Peggy's gallery wasn't just a place for art. Tea was a space where she could combine her passion for creativity with her bold personality. She had finally found a way to channel her rebellious spirit into something meaningful. By the late 1920s, Peggy was firmly established as a key figure in the modern art community. She hosted artists and writers in her home, fostering creativity and collaboration. Her rebellious streak continued to shine through. She shocked her family and high society with her bold choices, both in her personal life and her art collection. A collector in chaos. The summer of 1940 was one of uncertainty and fear. The Nazis were rapidly advancing and Paris was under siege. For most, survival was the priority. But for Peggy Guggenheim, the focus was art. While bombs fell on the boulevards, Peggy worked tirelessly to acquire as much modern art as possible. This was no easy task. Much of the art she sought was considered degenerate by the Nazis, and many artists were fleeing for their lives. Amid this turmoil, Peggy visited the studio of Romanian sculptor Constantin Brancusi. She had her eye on his iconic sculpture, Bird in Space. Peggy later admitted in her autobiography, "I thought if I had an affair with him, the bird would be cheaper." Her bold strategy worked. Brancusi eventually sold her the piece, carrying it out himself with tears streaming down his face. Peggy recalled, "I never knew if it was because he was parting with me or his favorite bird." This story captures Peggy perfectly. She wasn't afraid to take risks, whether in art or life. She pursued her goals with a relentless determination, even when the odds were stacked against her. In a world of chaos, Peggy found her purpose, collecting and preserving the works of artists who would define the modern era. Passion for art and romance. Long before her daring escapades during the war, Peggy had already established herself as a force in the art world. In 1938, she opened her first gallery, Guggenheim June, in London. Her inheritance provided the means, but her passion drove her success. With help from her friend Marcel Duchamp, Peggy's gallery became a hotspot for modern art. The first exhibition featured 30 works by Jean Cocteau, and she followed it with groundbreaking shows for Kandinsky, Calder, and Henry Moore. But Peggy wasn't just collecting art, she was also exploring her personal desires. Around this time, she began an affair with Irish writer Samuel Beckett. They met at a dinner in Paris in 1939, and Beckett immediately charmed her. After walking her home, he stretched out on her sofa and confidently invited her to join him. Their affair was brief but passionate, with one of their most memorable moments spent locked in a hotel room for 4 days. Although their romance didn't last, Beckett left a profound impact on Peggy. He encouraged her to focus solely on modern art, advice she took to heart. From then on, Peggy dedicated herself to promoting avant-garde artists, often buying at least one piece from every exhibition she hosted. Her obsession with art became her identity, and she embraced it fully. The scandalous side of collecting. Peggy's love life was as unconventional as her art collection. She had numerous affairs, often with the very artists whose work she admired. Some speculated that her low self-esteem drove her to seek validation through these relationships. Whatever the reason, Peggy was unapologetic about her choices. Her relationship with Brancusi exemplified her fearless approach to both art and romance. Desperate to own Bird in Space, Peggy visited him daily, believing that a romantic connection might secure the deal. Her persistence paid off, and even as the Nazis closed in on Paris, she managed to bring the sculpture into her collection. Peggy's willingness to mix business with pleasure often raised eyebrows, but it also allowed her to build one of the most remarkable collections of modern art. She was deeply connected to the artists she championed, not just professionally but personally. This intimate bond gave her unique insight into their work, making her collection all the more significant. As war consumed Europe, Peggy's determination to save art intensified. She recognized the danger posed to modern works and took it upon herself to protect them. In 1940, she fled to the United States with her growing collection, ensuring its safety. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. Peggy's dedication to modern art made her a trailblazer in a field dominated by men. She wasn't just preserving art, she was shaping the future of the art world. Her gallery hosted some of the greatest names of the 20th century, from Picasso to Kandinsky, and her collection became a testament to her vision and passion. Although Peggy's personal life remained as dramatic as ever, but her focus on art never wavered. She had found her calling, and nothing, not heartbreak, scandal, or war, could deter her. The ingenious beginnings of Guggenheim June. Peggy Guggenheim's first gallery, Guggenheim June, was more than just a clever name. It tied her family's well-known reputation to the prestigious French gallery, Bernheim June. Located on 30 Cork Street in London, her gallery became a hub for modern art. Peggy had a talent for surrounding herself with influential people, and her friend Marcel Duchamp played a significant role in her success. Duchamp not only introduced her to many groundbreaking artists, but also helped organize exhibitions at her gallery. The gallery's opening exhibition featured Jean Cocteau's drawings, and it didn't stop there. Peggy hosted solo shows for Wassily Kandinsky, Yves Tanguy, and Wolfgang Paulin, making waves in the art world. She also organized group exhibitions featuring now legendary names like Pablo Picasso, George Braque, Alexander Calder, and Constantine Brancusi. Peggy even discovered lesser-known artists like John Tunnard, helping to bring them into the spotlight. Although Guggenheim June was critically praised, it wasn't a financial success. The gallery lost £600 in its first year, which led Peggy to think bigger. She envisioned something more lasting, a museum dedicated to modern art. Inspired by her uncle Solomon Guggenheim, who had recently opened the Museum of Non-Objective Painting in New York, Peggy set her sights on creating a similar institution in London. With English art historian Herbert Read by her side, she began planning her Museum of Modern Art. She allocated $40,000 to get started, a significant sum at the time, but their ambitions quickly outgrew the budget. In June 1939, Peggy closed Guggenheim June with a farewell party. At the event, vibrant color portraits by photographer Giselle Freund were projected onto the walls, marking a stylish end to her gallery. Just as her museum plans were taking shape, World War II disrupted everything. The outbreak of war forced Peggy to abandon her plans in London. She relocated to Paris, where her passion for collecting art found an unexpected advantage. In Paris, Peggy faced an unusual market for art. With modern works labeled subversive by the Nazis, prices for paintings by artists like Picasso, Braque, and Dali were shockingly low. Peggy seized the opportunity, buying as many pieces as she could. She once said, "I tried to buy one painting a day, and her efforts paid off. With just $40,000, she assembled the core of what would become a priceless collection." However, her collecting wasn't just about business. Peggy was deeply connected to the artists she supported, often purchasing their work out of admiration or even pity. Encouraged by her former lover, playwright Samuel Beckett, Peggy focused her collection entirely on modern and abstract art. Beckett's advice solidified her vision, and she became one of the most important patrons of the avant-garde movement. As the German forces advanced, Peggy turned to the Louvre for help in protecting her collection. Shockingly, the museum refused, claiming her paintings weren't valuable enough to save. Undeterred, Peggy took matters into her own hands, fleeing to America with art and artists. With Europe becoming increasingly dangerous, Peggy decided to leave for America. But her journey wasn't just about saving herself. She played a vital role in rescuing several artists, including Max Ernst and André Breton, who were at risk of being sent to concentration camps. Ernst, who would later become one of Peggy's lovers, was labeled an undesirable, while Breton was known as an anarchist. Peggy's efforts helped them escape, and they joined her in her move to the United States. When Peggy arrived in America, she brought more than just her collection. She introduced European surrealism to a new audience, becoming its Bohemian champion. Her collection, now worth billions, was built during some of the most tumultuous years in modern history. It wasn't just about the art itself. It was about Peggy's relentless passion and her belief in the artists she supported. In August 1939, Peggy Guggenheim left London for Paris with grand plans. She wanted to secure loans of artwork for her upcoming museum. Her friend, art historian Herbert Read, even gave her a detailed list of artists whose work she should acquire. But the outbreak of World War II on September 1st changed everything. Peggy's dream of establishing a Paris museum was abandoned, but she quickly pivoted her focus. Determined to preserve the art she loved, Peggy decided to buy paintings instead. She wrote in her autobiography, "Having plenty of time and all the museum's funds at my disposal, I put myself on a regime to buy one picture a day." And she wasn't kidding. By the time she was finished, Peggy had an astonishing collection. She acquired 10 Picassos, 40 Ernsts, 8 Miros, 4 Magrittes, and works by Man Ray, Dali, Klee, Pollan, and Chagall. Peggy's passion for collecting wasn't just about the art, it was about protecting it from destruction. Modern works were considered degenerate by the Nazis, making them vulnerable. Her collection was growing, but so were the dangers in Europe. By 1940, the war had reached Paris, and Peggy realized it was no longer safe to stay. She fled to the south of France, taking her children, Peggy and Sinbad, with her. Peggy wasn't just thinking about her family, she was also safeguarding her priceless art collection. She approached the Louvre, hoping the museum would store her works. Shockingly, they refused, claiming her collection wasn't worth saving. Undeterred, Peggy made her own arrangements. She packed her artwork and shipped it to New York, labeling it as household goods to avoid detection. By 1941, she and her family were on their way to America, but they weren't traveling alone. Peggy gathered an unconventional group for the journey: her ex-husband Lawrence Vail, his new wife and children, and German surrealist artist Max Ernst, who had been at risk of persecution. Arriving in New York, Peggy brought not just her art, but also European surrealism to the United States. She was determined to make her mark on a new continent, building a new empire, the art of this century. In 1942, Peggy opened the Art of This Century Gallery in Manhattan. This wasn't just any gallery, it was a groundbreaking space that showcased cubist, abstract, and surrealist art. With its bold design and innovative layout, the gallery quickly became a sensation. One room even featured kinetic art, offering visitors an interactive experience that was ahead of its time. Peggy wasn't just displaying art, she was making history. In 1943, she hosted the first all-women art exhibition in the United States, Exhibition by 31 Women. The show included works by Frida Kahlo, Leonora Carrington, and Louise Nevelson, as well as lesser-known female artists. Peggy's support for women in art was revolutionary, and the exhibition highlighted her commitment to challenging norms. But Peggy's greatest legacy was her role in promoting artists like Jackson Pollock and Max Ernst. She gave Pollock his first major show, helping to launch his career. As for Ernst, Peggy had supported him in Europe and continued to champion his work in America. Their relationship wasn't just professional, it soon became romantic. Love and loss with Max Ernst. In 1941, Peggy married Max Ernst, making him her second husband. Their relationship was as passionate as it was complicated. Peggy had admired Ernst's work for years, and she had even helped him escape Europe during the war. Now they were partners in both life and art. But their marriage was far from perfect. Ernst was a difficult man, and their relationship faced constant challenges. Peggy's independent spirit clashed with Ernst's own insecurities. Still, for a brief time, they were a power couple in the art world, with their gallery and collection drawing attention from critics and collectors alike. Peggy's personal life was often messy, but it never overshadowed her dedication to art. Even as her marriage to Ernst began to crumble, she remained focused on her gallery and her collection. Speaking of which, Peggy Guggenheim's relationship with Max Ernst was as unconventional as the rest of her life. When asked why she fell for him, she replied bluntly, "Because he's so beautiful, and because he's so famous." That summed up much of Peggy's approach to romance. She was drawn to talented and celebrated people. Their marriage, however, was far from smooth. Ernst, a surrealist artist, sometimes even wore Peggy's clothes, adding an unusual twist to their already eccentric relationship. But the bigger problem wasn't his cross-dressing. Like Peggy's first marriage, this one was filled with constant arguments and even physical cruelty. It wasn't built to last, and cracks started to show soon after they tied the knot. The breaking point came with Peggy's 31 Women exhibition in 1943, the first all-women art exhibition in America. Among the featured artists was Dorothea Tanning, a surrealist whose work Peggy admired. Unfortunately for Peggy, Ernst admired Tanning for more than just her art. The two fell in love, leaving Peggy heartbroken. "I should have had 30 women," Peggy later joked. displaying her signature irony. By 1946, Ernst and Peggy were divorced, and once again she found herself alone. Speaking of the Art of the Century Gallery in Manhattan, the gallery wasn't just revolutionary for its content, but also for its design. Architect Frederick Kiesler created a space that broke all the traditional rules. Paintings were mounted on movable joints, allowing visitors to see them in different light angles. Some rooms would plunge into total darkness, while furniture doubled as seating and art displays. Peggy's gallery was unlike anything New York had ever seen, mixing American and European art in a way that felt entirely new. She became a champion for artists who were struggling to gain recognition. Through her advisor Howard Putzel, Peggy discovered Jackson Pollock, providing him with his first exhibition, a monthly stipend, and even his first commission. Critics like Clement Greenberg praised Peggy for giving serious artists their first big breaks, and fellow artist Lee Krasner said, "Art of this century was where it all started to happen." This gallery wasn't just about art, it was about changing the way people experienced it. Peggy's daring approach cemented her reputation as one of the most influential figures in the art world. A new chapter in Venice. Even during the chaos of World War II, Peggy Guggenheim never stopped collecting art. She made it her mission to acquire as many abstract and surrealist works as she could, famously aiming to buy one painting a day. Her passion for these forms of modern art set her apart from other collectors of her time. She purchased works by Salvador Dali and other renowned artists, ensuring that their creations would survive the war. Peggy's commitment to modern art was unwavering, even as her personal life fell apart. She channeled her energy into supporting artists and building a collection that would later be recognized as one of the greatest of the 20th century. Her relentless drive to champion abstract and surreal art wasn't just about buying paintings, but perhaps it was about preserving a movement she believed in deeply. After her divorce from Max Ernst in 1946, Peggy Guggenheim decided to close her New York gallery, The Art of the Century. She wanted a fresh start, and Venice, a city she called the city of her dreams, seemed like the perfect place. In 1948, Peggy was invited to showcase her collection at the Venice Biennale. This was a major event, and it marked the first time European audiences saw works by American artists like Jackson Pollock and Mark Rothko. Shortly after the Biennale, Peggy bought a unique home on the Grand Canal, the Palazzo Venier dei Leoni. The building, famously unfinished, became both her residence and a display space for her art. Peggy filled the palazzo with her incredible collection, which included Cubism, Surrealism, and abstract expressionism. Her decision to live in Venice brought her closer to European artists while continuing to promote American modernism. Peggy's life in Venice was as colorful as her art collection. She became a local celebrity, known for her bold fashion choices, including her famous butterfly sunglasses, designed by Edward Melcarth. Navigating the canals in her private gondola with her beloved dogs by her side, she turned her home into a lively hub for artists and writers. A museum in her home. In 1951, Peggy opened her palazzo to the public, transforming it into a museum. Visitors could walk through her home and see masterpieces by artists like Salvador Dali, Pablo Picasso, and Joan Miro. This was a rare opportunity for art lovers, as Peggy's collection was one of the few in Europe that included so many works by American artists. While she loved promoting established names, Peggy also supported emerging talent. In the 1950s, she championed Italian artists like Edmondo Bacci and Tancredi Parmigiani, giving them a platform to reach a wider audience. By the 1960s, however, Peggy had mostly stopped collecting new art. Instead, she focused on sharing her collection with the world. Peggy often loaned her pieces to museums across Europe and the United States, including the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum in New York, which was founded by her uncle. In 1969, she lent her entire collection to the museum, connecting her legacy to her family's name. Peggy's life in Venice was glamorous, but it wasn't without sadness. Despite her fame and influence, she often felt lonely. In one letter she wrote, "God forbid my ever getting too attached again in my life to anyone. So far everyone I loved has died or made me madly unhappy by living." This loneliness didn't stop her from making a huge impact on the art world. In 1962, Venice honored Peggy with an honorary citizenship, recognizing her contributions to the city and the global art scene. She continued to live in the Palazzo Venier dei Leoni, which had become one of the most important museums in Italy. By 1976, Peggy decided to donate her home and her collection to the Solomon R. Guggenheim Foundation. A midwife to modern art. Peggy Guggenheim's Art of this Century gallery on 57th Street was a game changer in the art world. Opened during World War II, it showcased Cubist, Surrealist, and abstract expressionist works in a setting that was as revolutionary as the art itself. The gallery's design was avant-garde. Paintings hung on wires, walls curved in unexpected ways, and lights flickered to create an unsettling yet captivating atmosphere. Visitors were immersed in a world that perfectly matched the daring spirit of the art on display. One of Peggy's proudest achievements during this time was her discovery of Jackson Pollock. She provided him with financial support, including a monthly stipend and a home in Long Island, giving him the time and space to focus on his work. Pollock's first solo exhibition was held at Peggy's gallery, helping to launch his career. Peggy often referred to herself as Pollock's midwife, nurturing his talent like a mother. But their relationship wasn't without tension. As Pollock became more famous and married artist Lee Krasner, Peggy felt sidelined. "I felt at the time they were very ungrateful," she said, expressing her disappointment in how she had been forgotten in his success. Despite this, her role in Pollock's rise remains one of her most significant contributions to modern art. A scandalous autobiography. In 1946, Peggy released her autobiography Out of This Century, which later became Confessions of an Art Addict. The book was shocking for its time, filled with details about Peggy's romantic escapades and her relationships with artists, writers, and even a ski instructor. She didn't shy away from sharing intimate details, including her multiple affairs with gay men and even her abortions. Her family was horrified. Peggy's wealthy uncles tried to buy all the copies of the book to stop it from being read, but it was too late. Critics weren't kind either. One review sarcastically suggested the book should have been called Out of My Head. However, the autobiography offered an unfiltered look into Peggy's life, giving readers a glimpse of her fearless attitude and unconventional choices. In 1948, Peggy's collection was featured at the Venice Biennale, marking the first time European audiences saw works by American artists like Pollock and Rothko. A year later, she opened her home to the public, turning it into a museum. Visitors from around the world came to see her collection, which included masterpieces by Picasso, Dali, and Miro. Peggy became a local celebrity in Venice, known for her unique style, including butterfly-shaped sunglasses designed by Edward Melcarth. She navigated the canals in her private gondola, accompanied by her beloved Lhasa Apso dogs. Despite her glamorous lifestyle, Peggy often felt lonely. She once wrote, "Life seems to be one endless round of miseries. I would not be born again if I had the chance." The final years. In her later years, Peggy's focus shifted from collecting to sharing her collection with the world. She loaned pieces to museums across Europe and the United States, ensuring her art would be seen by as many people as possible. By 1976, she donated her palazzo and her entire collection to the Solomon R. Guggenheim Foundation, solidifying her legacy. Despite her achievements, Peggy's personal life remained filled with sadness. She had casual flings with young Italian men, but avoided deep attachments. She described her loneliness in heartbreaking letters, revealing the toll her losses and disappointments had taken on her. In November 1979, Peggy suffered a stroke and passed away just before Christmas Eve at the age of 81. Her ashes were buried in the garden of her Venetian palazzo, alongside her beloved dogs, whom she called her babies. Today, the Peggy Guggenheim collection remains one of the world's most celebrated museums, preserving her extraordinary vision and passion for modern art. You see, Peggy Guggenheim's personal life was as bold and unconventional as her art collection. While living in Europe, she claimed to have had relationships with over 1,000 men. She didn't shy away from discussing her affairs and often joked about them. When asked how many husbands she had, Peggy quipped, "You mean my own? Or other people's?" Her lovers included well-known artists and writers like Yves Tanguy and Roland Penrose. These relationships weren't just romantic, they often inspired her deep passion for art and creativity. Speaking of which, Peggy's love for the avant-garde extended beyond her relationships. She worked tirelessly to support artists whose work was ahead of its time. Her focus was never on the financial value of art, but on its ability to challenge and inspire. While others might have been intimidated by her daring approach to life and love, Peggy saw it as a reflection of her free spirit. She became a model for the modern idea of a celebrity collector, blending art, fashion, and a rebellious personality into one unforgettable figure. Even her accessories, like her iconic sunglasses, became cultural symbols. A lasting legacy in Venice, in 1969, Peggy returned to New York to showcase her collection at the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum, founded by her uncle. The experience was bittersweet for her. She was shocked to see how much the art world had changed, calling it an enormous business venture. Peggy wasn't interested in art as a commodity. Instead, she focused on supporting artists and preserving their work. She once said, "I am not an art collector. I'm a museum." The following year, Peggy donated her Venetian home, the Palazzo Venier dei Leoni, to the Guggenheim Foundation, ensuring her collection would remain in Venice forever. Her collection included over 300 pieces by more than 100 of the most influential artists of the 20th century. It played a crucial role in turning Venice into a global hub for contemporary art. Her influence also shaped the Venice Biennale, where her collection helped spotlight American artists like Jackson Pollock. Today, the Peggy Guggenheim collection is one of the most visited museums in Italy. It continues to inspire art lovers worldwide, preserving her incredible vision. Peggy remains a cultural icon, remembered not just for her art collection, but for her fearless and unapologetic approach to life. Despite her success, Peggy's life was never without drama. She had a string of tumultuous love affairs and often clashed with her family, who disapproved of her bohemian lifestyle. Through it all, Peggy remained true to herself. Her life was as daring and unconventional as the art she loved. She once said, "I guess they thought I was a bit of a black sheep and would never do anything that was ever any good. I think I surprised them." Indeed, she did. Peggy Guggenheim's legacy isn't just her incredible art collection, it's her fearless spirit and her refusal to be anything less than herself. Her story is one of rebellion, passion, and an unwavering commitment to art. What part of her life surprised you the most? Was it her fearless passion for modern art or her unconventional relationships? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories that uncover the secrets of history's most captivating figures. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.